I don't know if it's here, but just over the last few years, like there must be different species.
Yeah, once they plant the corn,
Yeah.
but there's lots of them.
Oh, like they were used to be endangered at one point.
So everybody, I'd like to introduce Dean Assinewe, and known him for quite a few years now. We work together at FP Innovations. He's a registered professional forester. He's an Ontario Woodlot Association member. I kind of forced him into that. And just has a really neat place here with his wife Lynn and their kids. And it's called Green Legacy Farms.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for the nice introduction, John. But I think I have to, continue with that introduction to really explain why we decided to invest and to the lifestyle of living on a farm. I was born in Sagamok, Anishinaabe. That's near Massey, Ontario. For those who are unfamiliar with that, that's sort of in between Sudbury and Sault Ste. Marie, along Lake Huron, the Georgian Bay. And my father grew up on the land, and so did my mom. They were quite old when they passed on. My father was 86, my mother was 89, so it's really going back almost to pioneering times when you think about where they came from. But growing up on the reserve in Sagamok, it was very, like I said, almost like pioneering times. We didn't have any hydro, any running water. So that was sort of my upbringing up to a certain point. Of course, when I was born, we had electricity and running water and that, but we always had a really strong connection to the land. And my father, we had a farm. We had cows, pigs, chickens, quite large gardens. I come from a family of 12 kids, so I was number 11, and that was the workforce. So we did a lot of things manually. We did have a horse to pull logs and to pull the plow in the field. And again, with that sort of upbringing there, it just was in my blood to have dirt and sawdust in it. In the summertime, we did gardening. In the fall, we collected wood for the winter. Again, in the springtime, we did maple syrup, and the maple syrup has been a passion of mine for most of my life, I would say. And one of the things where before we landed in Bonfield, we were trying to find another place to live in around the Penetanguishene Midland area, and we were investing in a property out there and kind of putting all my stakes on the table in terms of landing that property. But it didn't work out with the real estate, and so a few years later on, this property came into our view, and we kind of again put everything on the table and uprooted the family and got this property. And not really what I had envisioned in terms of my maple syrup enterprise, but when I walked through the property, I did see signs of red maple and all the other indicator species like oak and yellow birch and I'm trying to think of some beech, and so I said, well, I thought I can do this, and so that was in 2018, and so I've been working at it since then, clearing trails and using some of the things I learned in school. I'm also a graduate of the Sioux College technical program, and from there I went on to Lakehead University and got my degree there. And so that was actually 20 years ago, to this year, I believe. So part of that training and mentorship, I took a tree markers course, and I think that really gives me the fundamentals of working in hardwoods and really applying some of the things I've learned through the training course. And Al was there close to 20 years ago when I did the tree marking program. And you know, if I were to recommend that to any woodlot owner who has hardwood, I mean, it would be probably one of the more valuable things in terms of my knowledge and working in the bush, because it takes a lot of guesswork out of it. You know, you're trained in tree identification and all the things that make a tree or the stand, you know, to determine the health of it, basically. And so a lot of that goes into my demonstration farm. I tend to look at it where I apply that knowledge and make a lot of mistakes too. I'll hopefully somebody will be able to point those out to me, but they're there. And so about the farm itself, it's not just forestry focus. It's only a really small part of it. The farm is 98 acres, and it's about 40 acres or 60 acres of bush, and about the remainder is the homestead. You can see the field back there. That tree line forms the east boundary, and then when we get out there, you'll see another sort of a shrub line that forms the western boundary, and the road is my southern boundary. And so we're interested in doing gardening. A couple of years ago, we raised 200 meat bird chickens, and that's a chicken tractor out there you can see. So we're raised 50 birds in each of those. We set up a very similar greenhouse. My wife is an avid gardener. We have laying hens, and I think we have 11 and 12 with a rooster. So we get plenty of eggs, and we actually sell the eggs too. A couple of years ago, we started off with 2 hives with honeybees, and that's a real adventure and a really steep learning curve. And you know, I was really pleased last spring when they survived and were able to naturally reproduce them through swarming activity. And today, I don't know, we'll go for a walk around them, and fingers crossed that when it warms up, we'll have 6 hives. So our goal is to go 10, perhaps 12, and we'll cut it off there, because it is a really intensive work during the summer and the fall. What else could I say?
Got a nice outdoor rink from what I could see.
Yeah, nice outdoor rink. We'll walk by the rink. It doesn't look like a rink today because my son been pretty busy once the COVID and the rinks open up, but we'll probably get it open up again this year, or this weekend, I'm hoping. And a couple years ago, through a program, we got a sawmill. So a part of that management for the woodlot involves firewood, like with a longer ambition of getting into maple syrup. But you'll see that there needs to be a whole lot of work to prepare that bush for maple syrup production. And so there'll be a lot of trying to manage for more hardwood, sugar maples and soft maple. I want to have a good diversity of trees in there, and plus animals and shrubs and things like that too. So that'll be one of my main focuses, kind of try to manage it right. But there's also white pine, white spruce, the odd black spruce in there. There's hemlock, there's cedar. I was going to ask you guys what the species were, but I'm kind of listing them out here. But so that's where the sawmill comes in handy. And I'm trying to derive a lot of value out of the forest at the same time while preparing it for maple production. So part of that harvesting, I also get firewood. And in the last couple of years, I was able to heat the house with firewood. But we went out and invested in a propane system, which makes it really nice. I no longer have to get up in the middle of the night and stoke the fire. So that's really it in terms of the like the forest management stuff. I really have to learn more about sawmilling to teach myself and hopefully pass that along. I mean, that to me is one of my career ambitions, is to pass along my knowledge to indigenous communities that have this opportunity, and well, they have a tremendous opportunity. So it's one of those things where, you know, where I have to build my own capacities to teach it. So this is one of the big things about Green Legacy Farm and reason why we're here. But our first stop, and really the only place we're going to get off the main trail, but I wanted to show the hives. And hey,
you have a bear problem?
we keep the fence just in case for bears.
Yeah.
Or really any other critters that, like a raccoon, who may want to try to get in on the honey. But we started off with 2 hives 2 years ago. I'm already losing track of it there because of how much work is involved. But I'm pretty sure we 2 years ago, and then last year we added the 2 hives or the 4 hives on. Could be mistaken. Anyhow, very steep learning curve on beekeeping. I was so happy again that the first 2 hives survived the first year, but you know, there's a corrugated box around the hive, and then a bubble wrap around it, so they're well insulated. And of course, with the snow, they're more insulated. And so fingers crossed, everything will, once it warms up again, you'll start to come out in March, even February. If the days are really warm, they'll come out just to stretch and to poop. But I have to clear out the front there, and I'm really looking at them now to see if there's signs of condensation to indicate that they're still in there and breathing and such. So anyway.
How much honey, Dean, would be produced from this many hives?
Per hive, you get an average of 30 to 80 pounds of honey. So that's, yeah, so it's significant and heavy. And so like last year we harvested from 4 in the back, and we grabbed a few frames out of the top ones, which are the latest that we added on.
Nice.
Yeah. So it really family affair.
What are some of the early wildflowers that bees can enjoy in the spring?
Dandelions. Dandelions. So we, you know, with the fields around here, there's tremendous amount of dandelions, especially where I cut the grass. Out here in the fields, well, there's a whole bunch of variety of flowers and such, which they really benefit from, like the whole season. And towards the end of it, there's how come I can't remember it there now? The golden one, goldenrod. Thank you. So you'll see a lot of that, and that's one of the last few. And then in the springtime, well, many of the trees are pollinating, so they'll be up there in the poplars gathering all that stuff too, which was really interesting for me to learn about.
Any basswood?
Yeah, there's basswood trees. If you look just on the right by the pool, there's basswood trees, and I never really paid much attention to basswood trees up until it started to keep bees. And basswood, in the first year that we had the bees, the basswood trees just, you know, fully bloomed in white flowers. And the bees from the 2 hives went out there. You could walk by the trees, and that's all you would hear is this hum. And but last year they didn't bloom. I was so disappointed because we had 4 productive hives, and I was just thinking, wow, think about all that honey I was going to get. But that's nature. That's nature for you. So I'm hoping this year the basswood will bloom again, and then we'll be able to get some of that basswood honey. And there's basswood throughout the bush back there too, so they'll go, I think, anywhere up to 8 kilometers is what some of the literature says about bees, how far they'll go. But they really don't have to go much further than you know, 1 kilometer or 2 up here to get any type of pollen. So
Are you cultivating these fields? Are you growing anything?
There's a garden right on the edge of that red pine where we planted where we built a garden, and so that's we planted pumpkins, and our goal is to put strawberries and blueberry, like high bush blueberries there too. So
But it's not, you're not growing hay or anything.
yeah, these are hay fields. So another farmer will come in the fall time and cut the hay. Very small benefit for as much land as it takes up. Stay here, and this is our shallow dug well, and you can see it's quite a distance from the house, and actually goes under the stream. You can see how the land is sort of formed here, that it kind of runs down in this way, which means that whatever activity happens up there eventually will get to our groundwater system. So trying to do things right again in terms of avoiding any contamination or spills is really important to us. But you know, there's also, you know, history back here as well, and there is some land use or some dumping that has occurred over the years. So we've been slowly cleaning it up, but you know, it's what we do today and for the future, I think is really important. So drinking water, obviously, we don't even treat it. So it comes from the well, we drink it, and it tastes pretty good. So we're still, you know, doing quite well. It must be, we have to test it from time to time just to make sure, but you know, again, as long as we take care, you know, the land and the water will take care of us too. So. How are you guys finding the snowshoeing? There's a lot of people walking on the snowmobile trail, but up here for a good reason. There's a couple of reasons here, and you can tell by the like the transition from the field to the bush. There's a lot of balsam fir, and up here I'm trying to actually manage hard, like maples and other hardwood, and for saw logs of the conifer. But I really wanted to keep like a thick entry or transition into this area because of the wind, and it really protects it. Like on those days I come out here when it's minus 20 and very blustery, the moment you step in here, or about 20 meters in, you could take off your coat because there's no more wind and you're moving, and to me that's just a real good benefit of having a lot of thick brush at the edge of the bush. And so I'm going to maintain it. I'm probably not going to do too much activity, but as you can see from this point, I've actually did some tree marking using yellow paint, identifying trees that I want to take out or harvest. Looking at all types of, you know, species. I'm taking out maple to promote one of the maples. Like in this situation, I don't want trees banging into each other. I want to give them the best opportunity for light and soil nutrient. And with trees like that, we'll make pretty good firewood. So heating my home, as well as you know, hopefully promoting some of my maples and another type of species. You can see that we have you know, hemlock here, which really makes this area really good habitat for deer. I've got a hunter that comes in every fall, and he's set up on the rock over there. And I painted this probably the first fall I was here, so the paint is still holding on pretty good, and it's just a reminder that I have to come in here again to do the work. So I'm managing for health. I mean, that to me is the primary objective of the forest, not just like this is what I'm after. This is a pretty good specimen of a red maple, and you know, you can tap these. It's not a sugar maple, but you still can tap them. And I likely at some point would take out this one as its competition, and so that one would be able to put on more growth and expand its crown to really create more sweeter sap. So this one hasn't been marked. I mean, I'm still kind of guessing between the two, but you'll see in and around here where the yellow is painted. And I'm also careful about sort of that wildlife potential too. So I wouldn't take out that hemlock. The hemlock is just one of those species that give this forest the character, the habitat, and who knows, someday I may take it down for a saw log to make it into lumber. But you know, that's sort of like you know, it's in prime location, and you know, obviously there's sap suckers that go after it too. And my neighbor traps over there, and he's been harvesting I think fishers. So the more I can kind of take care of this and create that sort of cover that they need, I mean, the more successful he's going to be as a trapper too. So it's kind of that synergy between neighbors there. And yeah, he comes and helps me with the sawmill. He's a millwright, so you know, he fixes my stuff. I pay him in beer. You know, it's
Beer and fur.
beer and fur, yeah. So anyway, any more questions about tree marking?
Dean, I just wanted to add the whole idea of the hemlock. So on the tree marking course, we spend as much time talking about habitat management. And one of the things that principles we try to pass on is the importance of hemlock, especially late winter cover for deer. So whenever you have like 3 interlocking hemlock crowns, even though it may not be a deer yard area per se, they're little travel portals or corridors as they move throughout these hardwood forests. So we would see this as an important feature to maintain this late winter habitat. Those hemlock intercept snow. If you walk under there, the snow depth will be less. And they also provide thermal insulation for the deer that might bed down. Yeah. And you'll be amazed if there's deer around, they're going to be bedded down under these little hemlock patches like this. So really important to keep that feature in the forest for sure.
Thanks, Al.
You're welcome.
Yeah, there's a tree right behind Fred over here. It looks like a sugar maple, but in fact is a basswood. And when I was going around selecting the trees and painting them, I was so happy to see that. But then in the springtime, I just noticed that, hey, that's a basswood tree, and I thought, well, what am I doing? And then the year later, I got the bees, and I was thinking, I was going to cut that tree down, but now it's you know, a pollen tree for the bees, so it's staying.
Thinning from below, and you've probably heard it many times. Well, what does it really mean? Thinning from below simply means removing these trees that are in the understory. So this is part of the overstory. That hemlock behind you, part of the overstory. So thinning from below is taking out this tree, those trees. Those smaller trees that are of smaller diameter that are not part of the dominant or co-dominant crown. So you're thinning from underneath. And it's often used in a shelterwood scenario where you're talking about trying to emulate that low understory burn that may have gone through there with a flame height of 1 meter and a low rate of spread. So in shelterwood scenarios, regeneration cuts especially, you'll hear the term thinning from below. It simply means keeping these high overstory, dominant, co-dominant, and removing those suppressed or understory trees. And you'll hear that tonight in my presentation, so I won't even have to explain that this evening. And visual is the best way to learn that kind of thing.
Do you use everything you cut here for firewood?
No, you know, there's a bunch of balsam that you can see, and what I've done in the first year, I just basically cut it and brush piled. You can see there's a brush pile there, and my intention is to burn it. But then after I was looking at, well, how much I have to remove, I would have brush piles everywhere. And so a couple of years ago, I purchased a wood chipper. It'll do up to 6-inch diameter, and that was a really good investment for me because I lay it down on the trail, sort of to create a nicer, even walking surface. It decomposes so fast, so the benefit is very short-lived. But I also use it in our gardening and landscaping up at the house, and to me that's been you know, just another added benefit to investing in it. So I've invested a fair bit in equipment, at least for me. You know, I've got a 36 horsepower tractor with a cable winch, the chipper. A couple of years ago, I invested in a grapple, so I'm able to pick up just about anything and really take my back out of the equation. But it's also making me quite a bit softer too, unfortunately. So I do have to get out here, and it's mostly my son and I there now. My wife couldn't be bothered. She's diabetic, and so really has to monitor her health and her sugars when she does activity like that. So I drag my daughter out here, and she's 16 and now has a young fella. So I try to get them out here. And anyway, a real family affair again. To quickly stop here, and I think I'm on the same page as Al and Fred here. When I went in here, it was quite thick, as you can see, surrounding. But I looked at what I had to work with, and these guys really stood out to me in terms of their health and their form. And so I decided, you know, I marked the other ones and kept these ones. Still not done, as you can see, but you know, it's too bad I didn't take a diameter of these trees, but I think in 2 years, these guys actually did put on some diameter, which I find really, this kind of proves a point, but it's really encouraging to me again that this is just evidence of the work that I was doing. And it's just, it allows me to kind of come in here again and assess what it should take and what I should keep. But I really, again, I should actually start doing some measurements in the bush just to, again, for myself, and perhaps when more students are coming, and actually show them some empirical evidence there of what's working and what's not. So just a quick stop.
That's the whole thing about tree marking, isn't it?
Yeah, it sure is.
Leave it better than when you found it. Emulate nature. You can't go wrong.
I think that, you know, while I was talking about maple syrup, I mean, there's also the birch syrup opportunity. And this, while this, I'm managing for maples, I mean, there's tremendous amount of white birch in here too as well. So who knows, into my retirement, I would be looking at, you know, what are the things that I can keep doing here, and in terms of the management and revenue, and that becomes one of them. So
we've got a couple guests from Finland. Have you had birch syrup? No? Does it happen? Yeah? It's a thing?
Okay, I wanted to stop here to show you some of the work in progress, and I think this is kind of moving closer to what I'm envisioning towards my hardwood stand. And you can see that it's still a mix, but all of sort of the smaller stuff is either red maple, or there are some hardwoods or sugar maple. But I'm also trying to maintain some of that dominant canopy stuff like the red oaks here. Keep some of the valuable species like the yellow birch, and I took out quite a bit of balsam fern here. I got nothing against balsam fern. It just happens like it creates such a dense canopy that the seeds of the other species, the hardwoods, aren't able to penetrate through. So it'll try to become a hardwood or a conifer forest at some point. So I'm kind of putting a stop to that, and again promoting maples here, which probably would have been here historically anyways, up until a fire, or maybe the previous owner cut it all down for firewood or logged it out. But I don't see much evidence of skidder trails in here that would suggest that. But again, nice slope, easy access to the trails, and that's really where I focused a lot of my work over the last 3 years, was trail side. And if you look behind you, you'll see some of that conifer, cedar, and hemlock mix, which really makes for good habitat, but not only that, really good for water quality as well. That drains down into the property over there too. So probably more important than my maple syrup ambition is to manage for the water quality and habitat for the animals, basically.
How do those two improve water quality?
With
Cedar and hemlock?
yeah, I believe so. I mean, just the health of some of these low areas where it's stopping any type of sediment or contamination to flow through would help that water quality.
And making sure that equipment doesn't run through there, but also making sure that we retain a lot of crown closure over them, as Dean is doing. So you're absolutely right on. These red oak are going to become critically important for a whole host of species. We really need those. Indicators. We're using exterior defect indicators to make these classifications. So AGS, UGS, UGS, AGS, UGS. Unacceptable growing stock and acceptable growing stock.
I got a funny story about that when I was going to follow up anyways, but I'm glad Al talked about AGS. AGS can change overnight. If you have a porcupine, for example, and we've had one here, there's a yellow birch I took out a couple of years ago, and it was sort of like the big grandpa here, and I was really sad to see that a porcupine I was looking around on the other side of the base, with the porcupine ended up kind of chewing away and girdling off all of the bark. And so that's, when I talk about the habitat, I'm not exactly friendly to everything. I mean, I don't mind porcupines, but if they start going after all of my yellow birch, then I'll have to have words with it. But again,
with lead.
yeah. But again, I mean, a tree like this, I would look at its future. I mean, it is close to a trail, which I'm probably damaging the roots, but there are other ones in the bush there where I'm really eyeing up and saying, hey, I really want that for the seed source and perhaps someday turning it into a piece of furniture too. So everything's got its destiny, I suppose.
Hey Dean, are you do you have a managed forest tax?
No,
rebate?
because I'm a farm.
Okay.
My farm sort of helps take care of my tax rates there too.
That's an interesting thing. So as a private landowner, you can get some of your taxes back if you have something called a managed forest tax rebate. So you have to have a managed plan for your woodlot, and then they'll give you what? It depends on the locality, 70% of your taxes?
Something like that.
Something like that. Okay. But if you're a farmer, then your woodlot also qualifies even if you don't do good management. So Dean is doing good management. He's earning his farmer or tax rebate that he's getting. But if I was a farmer and I didn't care about my forest and I was destroying it and letting cattle graze in here, I would still get the farmer tax rebate. So that's kind of where policy is not really, doing a lot of good. So as a result, most of the woodlots are not under the managed forest taxation rebate because the farmers are getting it, and those woodlots are being mismanaged. So it's a bit of a policy misstep, and it doesn't impact Dean, but it impacts a lot of other landowners.
Glenn Prevost prepares those
Yeah,
plans.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I'd love to see the government policy saying, sorry, if it's woodland, I don't care if you're getting the farmer's tax rebate or not, you've got to have a good management plan, sustainable plan for your woodlot.
Area. Again, very similar to where we just came from, but not on the hill, more of a flat area. And this area was even more dense with balsam fir. So I used the tractor to push down a lot of the stuff like this. I chipped it up and was piling logs for the sawmill. And so this area, was beneficial for that. But even within, I think I came in here in the fall, and by that spring, I was able to see maple starting to come up through the soil. So it was sort of like my gamble. I'm hoping that, if again, I lucked out in determining that hard maple tree and and the soft maples that are here were dropping seeds and they weren't doing anything, but by letting in the sun and you know, the heat in the soil, it again germinated the seeds. And I was just so happy again to see maples coming up and other types of vegetation. So I'm thinking this is going to be beneficial for me, and as well as you know, the deer that come here as well. And we have turkeys in the area as well. So I've seen them roam around in here, but I think this is actually going to, you know, they're going to benefit by having more feeding areas as well. So you can see that when the wind does pick up, it takes the tops off them and actually knocks them down. But I kind of knew that going in. One of the main reasons again was to allow the seeds to come up, and so and sort of changing that dynamic of the forest here. And if you look behind you again, there's that sort of low lying area. I won't even go in there. I am sort of creating a stronger transition into it, but I'm moving my trail around here and really avoiding it coming through here, because in the springtime it does get pretty wet there. The ground is so soft, and you're just going to create rutting, and then you're actually going to be changing the water course. You know, you might be diverting it away, you might be creating more pools, which may not be a bad thing, but you know, if you're riding equipment through like a tractor, there's oil, there's grease on it, gasoline, just more opportunity to create contamination, and I'm avoiding all that. And of course, there may be specialized plants or medicinal plants that grow in those areas. So I'm always being aware, trying to be aware of that as well. This might be a handy spot to build a cabin someday too. I was thinking, you know, just kind of plot one here, and
I was looking up on the big rock over here. I don't know what big rock or just
yeah, that is a rock there, and actually there's some smaller oak, and you know, that's where the deer hunter goes up there. And I try to hunt deer too, but haven't been successful yet. But yeah, this has changed quite a bit since a couple of years ago. It was, you wouldn't be able to see through it. It looked like that, and maybe not like that, but like that. You couldn't see through it.
And just preventing any regeneration from coming in there, right?
Yeah. I mean, I did see the hard maple there, and I'm saying, okay, that's what I'm going to try to work for. And then, you know, I'm not everything, like you do see the balsam there, and so I'm not trying to be too drastic in my approach.
And really, like under a natural disturbance regime, I mean, that balsam builds up. You could have an understory fire come through that would have taken that out, or certainly spruce budworm. So balsam fir are very susceptible to spruce budworm infestations, but eventually that balsam is going to go, and you've basically sped up that process in terms of succession and working with what nature would have done.
Again, the approach was take out the UGS and try to that good stock or the AGS type thing, managing for good quality. Well, this is probably more of a selection type of harvesting, because I did use tree marking. The other alternative to that would be like a clear cut type of cut, where you're taking out the majority of them. And then there's a shelter wood, which probably would be more of a, under the circumstances of a white pine, or, yeah, I guess a white pine.
Yeah, white pine would work. Hemlock, you could do a shelter wood system.
Hemlock, all could use shelter.
Most time, what you're seeing out here is a selection type of harvesting. I gotta get the rest. Have you guys stayed in a couple of weeks, I hope. But anyway, I wanted to stop here again really quickly. This is an area that was really, again, I mean, almost impassable. So I did a fair bit of work in removing enough trees and logs to build a trail. There really was no trail here before. And, you know, when I come across something like this here, that really got me excited. I mean, the first thing that I thought was, you know, which one? At some point, I'm going to have to make that decision. And you know, again, I think between the two, probably that one is the better of the two, and I may take out that. And so it becomes really a decision-making factor. The trees in this clump, I didn't get to, but again, if you look around the trees there, you start seeing which ones might be the preferred ones to take out, you know, to allow better health, better growth potential of the remaining trees. So in terms of what's behind me, you start seeing that it's again cedar and hemlock. If there's a reason to go in there, I think pretty hard about why I'd be going in, especially the timing of the year. Winter is the better time to do it. I'm not compacting, I'm not damaging the soil, and with my equipment, I'm able to go 100 feet out with a cable and bring it in. So even if it was a fair ways back there, I could pull it in and not even have to go back there as deep as I would with any other type of equipment, I suppose. But anyway, you know, fire protection as well. I mean, that we could have a drought this summer and the whole thing could go. But if I manage understory, maybe it won't get too intense and burn down my whole forest. Is the other thing that's working in the back of my mind.
But you know, the medicinal plant, we did one course, Dean, that was an indigenous focused tree marking course. We brought in an expert in medicinal plants, and they're everywhere.
Yeah.
Like wet, dry, no matter what the terrain, there was an indigenous use for that plant. And so I wouldn't say one area is more prolific in terms of medicinal plants than another. And sometimes it was disturbed areas where heal-all was coming in.
Yeah.
So it's hard to say. You know, a great resource is Brenda's book. One of our colleagues, Brenda Chambers, who unfortunately passed away, wrote a book, and it says Plants of Central Ontario. And every plant in that book, she has researched the indigenous use of that plant. And it's amazing what things were used for. And she has, white cedar is often a very important indigenous species. It is used in a lot of ceremonies and a lot of healing medicines.
Very high in antioxidants, vitamin C. Yeah. Actually, my son has a bit of a cold right now there, and he's drinking that cedar tea.
Is that right?
Yeah.
You hear the odd time?
Yeah, you can find the odd pellet there. Yeah. Did anybody tell me what these trees are here? There's a few around us, but yeah. Scientific name for tamarack is? Yeah, right on. Good. But something's going on in here in terms of the health of them. They're actually declining. They lose their foliage in the winter anyways, but there's some of them that aren't going to put it back on there in the springtime. So I've actually been in here. It's funny, you can see where the stumps are, but that was last year when I came in and took out some of those dead hemlock or tamaracks. They're very rot resistant as well, so they're going to make good posts or beams for some of my construction projects. But another neat feature that I've noticed in here is, you know, if you look around, you'll see white pine, and this area is very, like, the soil is very wet. It's like very hummocky. You can tell. I mean, there's larch growing in here, but I just find it really interesting. If you look around, you see the white pine growing in here, and I always find that kind of interesting when a tree like that is kind of growing off site. But I'm trying to promote white pine as well, and so I'll be careful about, you know, looking at that tree. You could tell it's quite a young white pine, and I'll try to manage the understory for it, or the ground, and if there's any white pine coming up, I'll try to perhaps replant it somewhere, or do something like that. Oh. Oh, okay. So there's a health and safety aspect to managing a woodlot, and I probably should have opened with that discussion right off the bat. But when you're working in trees and you're working with chainsaws, and you always have to be aware of the hazards and things that could be falling from above. Things could be actually glancing off something and coming at you. I work with a small tractor, so by any means it's not safe like a skater that's enclosed and has a canopy around you. So it could be very risky. And I'm basically self-taught with a chainsaw, but I would if anybody were to want to invest in land or a woodlot, and I certainly would recommend them taking safety courses and operating chainsaws and invest in personal protective equipment. I'm wearing chainsaw boots. If I'm cutting, I'm wearing safety pants, cut resistant safety pants, a hard hat with a shield, with earmuffs, and cut resistant gloves. And so when it is a hot day, you're actually sweating quite a bit. But again, that I'd rather have that than cutting off, losing a limb or cutting myself. And it does happen. A couple of years ago, I bought this brand new fancy pants for working in summer. And I was a little bit off that day, a little tired. And so I was kind of proud of my pants. I went out there, and within the first 5 minutes, I nicked my pants there. And the pants I've had for 20 years, not a single scratch on it. So it's one of those things there where, hey, the pants were $200, but if I were to cut my leg, who knows if I could have made it home in time. So that's a really important consideration to have when you're doing this. And I thought this would be a cool tree to show. Just an example of a selection cut where you've got a cluster of trees actually growing right together and really competing for each other and for light and soil nutrients. And so when I looked at it there, again, picking the best out of the three for its potential. And I'm kind of proud of the cut there too. Like I don't think I've wounded that one. The only thing that I'm concerned about there now is water getting in here and rotting it. But it's one of those things I could manage over time, and perhaps even cut it at an angle so water will glance off and not sit there. Because in this case, this is a I don't know. That looks like a soft maple to me. But
Is it possible to coat it?
pardon me?
Coat the wound?
Yeah, you could possibly coat it as well. The healthier the cut, it may kind of just callus over. But in the stump, I really don't know. It's going to be an experiment for me, actually. So this is how I'm going to have to treat it. And then you can see elsewhere where, I chose some maple over balsam fir where the maple itself had defects in it and cankers and stuff. So it'll be good firewood. And then at some point, perhaps that balsam fir will be of dimension where I could put it through a sawmill. I'm always kind of sound like I'm going to be, cutting trees for wood, but that really is part of the management of the forest. It's like you're managing for product, and it's actually what gives me the resources to do it is getting something out of the bush so I can continue doing it too. It's not all about money. We're pretty much done. If we have time to take a look at the sawmill. Yeah. All right. Let's head out.